I do an interview shows like for K.O.O.P radio, and then I podcast the episodes. And I have to convince myself sometimes. It's like, oh no, this is worth it. And it's like I do it for my own fun and benefit, but I have to make sure it's like that I post things and podcast the episodes, because there's, even though I don't necessarily monitor how many people listen or how many downloads there are, it's like, or how many people listens to the radio show live, it's still important to somebody. And I've had some folks, it's like, say they really appreciate my style of stuff, and it's creating an alternative for it's like maybe the average radio or podcast landscape. They're finding something, and it's like in what I do, and it's like, and they appreciate, or at least appreciate the work that I put into it. It's like, even if they don't necessarily listen to a particular episode.
Broadcaster, DJ, and audio engineer Tracey Schulz joins the Plutopia Podcast this time. Tracey is a regular voice on K.U.T FM and K.O.O.P radio. He joins Scoop and Suzy in a wide-ranging discussion about radio, making media, and much more. Live, this is the Plutopia News Network. I'm Scoop Sweeney, and my co-host, Suzy Sheeler, is right over there. I will defer to Suzy to introduce our esteemed guest who's putting up with us with all of our miscues.
Hello, Tracey. It's
Hey.
so good to see you again. Everybody knows Tracey. My God, he's been around forever. He's the radio man. He works for K.U.T. Well, he did do some work for K.U.T, but does K.O.O.P. He works with K.O.O.P.
Well, yeah, it's like a K.O.O.P. I did KGSR.
KGSR, and didn't you do 101?
101X, and
Yeah.
I was doing promotions for KLBJ, and
Right.
and I got started in 2009. Basically, it was the 2008 Great Recession that
Ooh.
the job that I had as a draftsman is like, it was coming to an end, and because we did a lot of school-related work and funding was frozen. So I got a severance package. I had a couple hours worth of radio, film, and television credits at San Antonio College, and I decided to double down and make radio full time.
Nice.
And it kind of worked out. Kind of worked
Well,
out.
so
Yeah.
were you wanting to be an engineer with the draftsman thing, or is that
Well,
where you were going?
Yeah, all those years ago, it's like I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, because there was a guy named Jay Mays who was kind of famous for doing the redesign of the Volkswagen Bug. And so
The new one?
yeah, the new edition that came out is like some 20 years ago now plus.
Mhm.
And he also did the Ford Thunderbird, and he did the Audi TT, if you remember that little two-seater sports car. And
Yes.
so I was like, it's like, that's what I want to do. I want to do
Cool.
car design, product design, and make cool things. And but when I got to UTSA, it's just like to do mechanical engineering school stuff, I hit a plateau where I just didn't have it in me to do the homework. And then I couldn't just regurgitate things. It's like for the tests.
Right.
And so I hit a plateau. It's like, I did okay in high school when everything was kind of easy, but whenever I started hitting thermodynamics, I couldn't make it. I couldn't fake it. So
Yeah, because you can't really lie about numbers. You can't. It's like the difference between baking and cooking, I think.
Yeah.
Math and words.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in college. I was studying business, but I was also working late night at a local radio station up in North Texas, just north of Dallas. And I decided finally that I was just not the guy to be in marketing, and I stayed with radio for about 10 years before I ended up at KPFT in Houston, which was a total different kind of thing. That's where I met our buddy Thorne Dreyer.
Mhm.
yeah.
It's been all fun since then.
Well, you have that classic radio voice. It's like,
Yes.
that's that timbre, and I was getting into it. It's like just when things were kind of shifting a little bit, and they were kind of dissuading people from that classic radio voice.
They want you
And,
all to sound the same. Is that the
well,
idea?
I guess it was like an everyman type quality,
Yeah.
and so they were just kind of it was flavors. It was just a changing tide, and it's still kind of shifting a little bit. Um, vocal vocal shred was something that people talked about. It's like a few years ago. It's like where you have that kind of like valley speak type thing,
Oh,
and you
that
have
was
like
all over California radio.
yeah, and it's like and you have that lit at the end when
Mhm.
somebody
Oh,
says everything like a question.
I hate that.
But that became in that became passable,
Yeah.
if not in style, and so that's you started hearing folks on the airways, it's like especially broadcasters and interviewers. It's like, and I guess that's again kind of playing into that more
Wow.
naturalistic way of
Yeah. When I was working in the Bay Area, uh, I was kind of the outlier because I was doing a lot of freelance stuff for KSAN and KPFA in Berkeley, and there were a lot of guys who were just, they had all sorts of uh, accents and mannerisms that were not the Ralph Radio kind of thing coming to you live. It's, people talk like people, and I've moved to that too. I was just this is how I normally sound, but it paid off in radio for a while anyway. But radio stopped paying about 1980. I was with Zodiac News Service, which is a radio news service in San Francisco. And when Reagan got into office, radio stations said, screw the news. We're not going to do news anymore. So no more news service.
wow.
Wow. That's
Well,
crazy.
well,
You
right when I got into radio, and I went back to class because I had like a severance package, and I could go to school and I could take an internship in Austin. I figure it's like I'm going to move from San Antonio to Austin and use this school year as a means to be able to do so. So I was able to make myself a job at MS at 101X, KROX here in Austin, and then just hung around. And they had enough stations that I just kind of floated around to make a spot on myself. But it was good timing in a one weird way because of the recession. They were firing people. So, but
Oh,
I was working for free, so they couldn't
right.
fire me. So I dodged the layoffs. It's like they had two runs of layoffs. It's like in when I was there in that spring of 2009, and I just kind of kept my head low and did a lot of things for free.
Yeah.
And so by the time it's like the summer rolled around, when they were starting to it's like to get back, it's like some intro job positions, I was able to make myself useful. And
Oh,
so
that's
that's
fantastic.
That's
yeah.
Well,
very, very
that's
smart there. That's
absolutely.
identical to how I got started in radio in my hometown, the town where John Lebkowski and I both grew up. And I got a training class that a local guy did, and he directed me over to one of the local radio stations. And I went there, and they said you could be an intern. I had no idea what an intern was, but I
Oh, I
was
bet you
in.
found out.
I wasn't getting any money, but I was getting a lot of experience, and I just hung around. And all of a sudden, the late night DJ quit or got fired, something like that.
Yeah.
And
And that's
I
how it
jumped right
works.
in, and it was downhill from there.
That's honestly, it's like why how a few of my friends were able to make something happen was because at KLBJ AM, at least then at that time, they still had an overnight person. Things have kind of shifted away from a lot of that. It's like where a lot of things are pre-recorded now. It's like for midnight to 6 a.m. and for Saturdays and Sundays. It's like at least at commercial stations. But they still needed somebody to check the tower to make sure all the stations were running, especially during thunderstorms and
Yeah.
blizzards. And so if you were the guy that had to be there, it's like from 12 midnight until 6 a.m. It's like you had to check, make sure it's like all half dozen or so radio stations were working and all the streams were up.
Oh,
And
wow.
and if somebody had like a live remote on Saturdays and Sundays from a car dealership or something, you had to make sure it's like their spots fed into the machine and
Whoa.
regurgitated on time. So it's like it was job security. So
Yeah.
Yeah, the automation solution to radio turned out to be really ugly for people in small, local radio stations that were scooped up by the big chains. Because a lot of the big guys, Clear Channel or whatever they're calling themselves now, would scoop up all these little local stations and feed them programming over from the mothership, wherever that was.
yeah.
And
They do that
there
with
was no real local programming going on, and a lot of these things, there was no local news. It was just, turn the switch and there you go. And that was a sad thing because a lot of these little rural radio stations, that was the only news out there. And when that went away, then people were just, left high and dry.
Yeah, there. I think back. It's like at least in Upper Rumples, where I originally grew up at. There's a KNBT, and KNBT is one of those small stations that they do weekly, or I say weekly. They do it's like pretty much every hour. It's like especially during the news programs, live remotes or local announcements or something along those lines to make it hyper focused local. And I think
That's really cool.
They've kept up because New Braunfels is not a big town, but it's a growing town. And so I think they were able to find a way to have that visibility and still make it work economically.
Mhm.
And especially when we were having floods and like, what was it, 98 and 2001, we had two major floods.
Yeah.
And having that type of on the ground response and being able to coordinate information that was kind of key. So a lot of folks recognize that, and Wimberley has a community station now, and they've been there for a few years now. And part of the reason why they have that station is because of the local need during emergencies, during floods and things. And so there's been some like swings. It's like back. It's like to having that hyper local coverage. So
Yeah, you especially in this area, and even more so in West Texas and North Texas, which is basically Tornado Alley. If you don't have someone who can warn people that something bad is about to happen, it can have a horrendous impact on a little town that doesn't know the tornado's on the way because the radio station is still playing stuff from L.A. or New York.
Yeah, and I had I had one time I was up at my weekend job. It's like, and they said, "Oh, hey," it's like, "Have you are you talking about the tornado?" And I was like, going, I'm looking at the National Weather Service general map, and the default National Weather Service website for our area just has basic warnings and highs and lows, and it doesn't have details. It's like, oh well, you have to go to the TV weather map. And it's like, and you go to the type in, it's like the local TV station, and you see their weather map. It's like, oh hey, there's there's a tornado watch in effect. It's like for everything east of Mopac here in Austin.
Oh God.
It's like, I did not know that. So
That's pretty much all of Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this wide band. It's like going up and down. It's like just to the east side. I'm sorry, just to the west side because it was going west to east. So pardon me, but yeah, it's like it's going. Everything is like from 71 to 183. It's like just west of Mopac. It's like it's like there's a and I think there's a watch and then there's a warning, and I think warning is more serious that they actually
warning means they've
saw
seen
something.
One. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a warning in effect. And so
back in the Stone Age of radio, we didn't have any of that. All we had was the emergency broadcast system, which was a little receiver that every station was supposed to have in the studio that would go off when they triggered what they called an EBS alert that said, there's an emergency, and then you would get information that was broadcast from some central station that would tell you there's a tornado warning or whatever. And then
president's been shot.
You basically had to either go look outside or go to the Associated Press wire machine and see if it's printed. And they would usually have, if you had local news on the Associated Press machine, then it would print out the weather warnings. But it wasn't real instantaneous, so you were flying by the seat of your pants at little radio stations like ours.
Yeah, I was just kind of amazed that the National Weather Service website for at least our zip code is like wasn't as detailed as the television. And so it's like it was kind of I was a little, but it is what it is. It's like you just try to get it's like the best information possible out there to the folks. It's like in real time, and people like during the freeze. It's like I was on the air during the freeze. It's like that Valentine's Day in 2020, and I came in specifically because I knew other people had family, pets, plants that they needed to take care of, and elderly family members, and so I was able to make my way. It's like to the station, and I was able to be on the air. It's like for the next 2 days, is doing my normal shifts, and everything worked out. But it was awesome and crazy at the same time. It was like in retrospect, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I remember trying to find out what was going on, and we lost all power out here where I'm out in Bastrop County, and we lost all power and all water, and there's no internet. All I had was the weather radio, which is battery operated, so I was able to kind of fish around and find somebody who was broadcasting. There were a lot that weren't. I mean, they lost power too, and that is
I don't think we're going to have
great
that
things
this
about
year.
radio. Is it, TV is great, but radio is a lot easier to get back on the air. There's not as much, infrastructure. You have to get up and going when you are having a power problem.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like if you had satellite TV and you got, a tough storm, it's like your signal could go out.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's like radio for at least, for all intents and purposes, kind of pierces a lot of that. But yeah, we got lucky. It's like being at the station was on campus and it was near a hospital, and so
you're on the grid.
It wasn't part of the rolling blackout or it's like the cramping down sake of services. So kind of was lucky in some ways. It's like to avoid some of the hardship that other people had. And me and my folks live in the Braunfels, and we got lucky down there as well. It's like where we boiled water just because, but it's like we still had lights and heat. It's like for throughout that whole experience.
So, wow, we didn't.
Yeah, it's just luck. Honestly, it's just dumb luck in some respects. Yeah.
Even the exit signs weren't lit. I mean, and I thought those were like lit by batteries because like when everything goes out, they're supposed to stay on.
Or it's like solar panels or something. I would have thought.
So I opened the door in my apartment. I'm on the 4th floor, and I open the door to the and I have to take the dog out, and it's pitch black. I can't see anything.
Wow.
I had to like feel my way along the wall to get to an exit door. It was awful. The exit signs weren't up. Oh, I wanted to ask, okay, so we were talking earlier just for a few seconds about classic radio voices and accents. So I just found out in France that on TV as well as radio for a long time, and I knew this, that you had to have what they call Parisian accent to do any kind of radio or any kind of television news, that kind of thing. Yeah, you had to have a certain way to speak. They're very much like that. There's a book. I mean, you can only name your children after saints, etc. And there's a list of names that you can. That's why you never hear of anyone named, Sunflower Français. This just doesn't happen.
Really?
Yeah, they're not allowed to.
That's a little different.
The way they are. So, so now they're trying to put diversity into the mix now, because they're like, oh, we can't be seen as being, thinking everyone's low rent who's not in Paris. So now they're actually courting people who have a Marseille accent or an accent from Bordeaux, and they're all very different. It's like a Dallas accent versus a Houston accent. I can tell a difference, and so that's their new diversity play. It's a big one.
That's pretty interesting. I know it's like for traditional TV and radio is the Midwestern accent. It's like
exactly.
And so I've had, when I was waiting tables in the early 90s, I had people ask me, it's like where I was from, if I was from somewhere like Minnesota or Milwaukee or something like that. And I didn't get it, but I think it was because I stuttered a lot as a kid and I watched a lot of TV. And I still stutter, but it's less, and it only comes up under certain times. And I think maybe I reprogrammed myself some way by watching a lot of TV. So
yeah.
When I moved from KPFT in Houston all the way to KPFA in Berkeley, I stood out like a sore thumb because I thought I had radio voices. Like, no, you've got a Texas accent. It's like, oh, okay, great. And that's the kiss of death in that market. So fortunately, I got into print news service for radio, which was a hybrid, and got to do a lot of audio.
Well, what was that guy's name? He did pretty well with his accent. Shit, he was with the Geese and Slaws.
Oh,
what was his name? Bob and Dale. Dale?
I can picture the two guys.
He got fired. Like right in the middle of the show.
Oh,
you talking about Bobby Cole?
Well, it was the other guy, Bob Cole, and
the Geese and Slaws.
Yeah, the guy from the Geese and Slaws. I can't remember his name. I can't believe it. He used to do the Jack Brown cleaners where you can pick up your skirts and drop your pants or something. Thought he was so funny. What was his name? Oh my gosh.
Sammy Allred.
Yes, I was gonna say
it.
Okay. Yeah, he's a local radio legend. Sammy Allred.
Oh man.
Yeah. Apparently he got fired a lot.
He got fired a lot, and he was out of the scene. At least it's like I just knew him by infamy. By the time I started hanging around KLBJ and KLBJ AM,
we used to listen to him all the time. He was just hilarious. He's absolutely hilarious. He said there was another one where he said you got to go over to whatever Chevrolet where you get more head and leg room.
Great.
Gee, I wonder why they objected to all of that.
Love that guy. God, he's funny.
I do consider a privilege to kind of being able to meet Cactus Pryor, and his son Don Pryor is still at KLBJ AM, and I got there. Cactus Pryor wasn't making the rounds all the time, but he was nearby, and so he would come in occasionally. So it was nice to being able to meet him because
very cool. Yeah,
I grew up really in New Braunfels and San Antonio, but it's like I tried to catch up as fast as possible when I got to Austin, and he was like just one of those guys. It's like that's been around, and it's like and one of the original guys who did the wit and witticism type style of delivery of things on broadcasting, and there's not a whole lot of folks that do the Will Rogers style of broadcasting anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, people that sound down home are kind of a vanishing breed now on any kind of media. Everybody is supposed to be professional and serious.
Yeah, you have to enunciate and learn your diction and all that kind of stuff. Well, I have to say though, I have heard people like on podcasts or things who I can't understand anything they're saying. Really, they've never taken into consideration that maybe, they need to slow down or, even maybe pronounce things correctly. That would help also.
Yeah.
But
and certain podcasts get famous and then they don't necessarily feel they need to change. And so it's like they have their own language inside the podcast itself, and it's like I don't know. It's like I think podcast is great, but also I think it's like it may have made things more niche.
Yeah.
It's like in less universal. So
There's no entry exam or anything like that to get into podcasting. You just have to have
yeah.
a microphone and a
Computer.
something to say, and you don't even.
Oh no, you don't
You
have
have
to
to have something to say. You could just babble a lot. Babbling is very big in podcasting.
Only fans.
I've done
Only
that
fans,
myself.
And it's funny to me because it's like I when something hits and it becomes super popular and it becomes the thing, and it's like and it has like millions of fans, and it's like I don't always get it, because if it's genuinely funny, that's one thing. If it's like if they have an angle or they're reaching an audience that is underserved, it's like but there's times where it's like some things get super popular and I don't necessarily understand why. I think it's luck. It's like just happened to hit on a thing at a time, and everybody jumps in on it and becomes buzzy, and that perpetuates them.
Yeah, a lot of times I will listen and I'm not getting it, and it's probably because I'm from a way different generation than these folks are from.
Yeah, but there every once in a while something that's like comes across. It's like that you're like, oh, it's like this is like there's a famous podcast called Song Exploder, and the idea, it's an interview show, and they ask, it's like their guests, it's like about that one song, and they do like a deep dive. It's like how that one song by that one artist kind of came to be, and there's something about the way the dynamic worked and the way it's like the host came across, and that now it's like it's a famous podcast and they've gotten famous people to do the show, and it's just because of word of mouth, and somebody got to somebody's publicist and they heard good feedback about how their friends were treated on it, and that kind of perpetuates, kind of like WTF with Mark Maron. It's like, he was famous before he started doing that among comedians, but then people heard what he was doing and said, it's like, all right, cool, this is talking with just a guy in his garage and is friendly, and so let's do it. And next thing you know, it's like Obama's on it. So it's interesting how there's like certain things can kind of snowball in some ways, and you end up like it ends up promoting itself. It's like just through word of mouth and through good vibes and good experiences.
Yeah, the problem with podcasting is it's easy to get into, but it's hard to get an audience, because I've had so many people that I know who have done podcasts and maybe made it through 5 or 6 episodes before they got discouraged because they were getting no hits at all. And that is kind of how we got started. We started out, we had no people listening. It took us a while, and you just had to stick with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know. It's like I do an interview show. It's like for K.O.O.P radio, and then I podcast the episodes, and I have to convince myself sometimes. It's like, oh no, this is worth it, and it's like I do it for my own fun and benefit, but I have to make sure it's like that I post things and podcast the episodes, because there's, even though I don't necessarily monitor how many people listen or how many downloads there are, it's like, or how many people listens to the radio show live, it's still important to somebody. And I've had some folks, it's like, say they really appreciate my style of stuff, and it's creating an alternative for it's like maybe the average radio or podcast landscape. They're finding something, and it's like in what I do, and it's like, and they appreciate, or at least appreciate the work that I put into it. It's like, even if they don't necessarily listen to a particular episode.
Yeah, problem with radio is, I remember trying to, project out to this audience that I couldn't see, and there was no feedback. So, and, unless somebody
Yeah.
called up and complained or said it was great, so it was kind of hard to get used to that fact that you were talking to somebody that may or may not be out there. So, a few of the stations I worked at, they
Yeah.
probably weren't out there.
Yeah, like again, like the overnights, it's like, you just like you might be talking to that one guy who's like stuck at a hotel desk. It's like check-in desk or something like that on Highway 9.
Oh
And
man.
you might be just like your one audience member. It's like, but you have to treat it like every audience member is important, and you are talking to one person. That was another thing that they would always say. It's like act as if you're talking to somebody, and a singular person, and make it addressed that way. So
And how did you both just, and maybe this is honestly, this could be a gender-based question. But how do you have the confidence to just jump on and talk because it's definitely a confidence thing that I didn't have. I don't have.
yeah, there's something to it. Because I'm not naturally confident. I am I'm a guy who's like stands in the back. It's like at the concerts, even at like mixers. It's like where the idea is to work the room. I'm kind
Right.
of hesitant of doing that, and I have to kind of psych myself out and to do something like that. Um, but in some ways, you're for radio, it's like you're in a booth by yourself, and so you can kind of trick yourself and thinking
Mhm.
it's like that you're doing it for yourself, and it's like that nobody else is listening. And after several years of that, and I still get like a little nervous. It's like when somebody said, "Oh, I heard you," and it's like
Yeah,
you
you
sounded,
did.
and I was like, "Oh, cool." It's like, how bad did it suck? It's like, no, it was great. It's like going, "Oh, you're being nice." It's like, seriously, you can tell me it's like if it sucked or not. It's like, no, it's like, stop making it weird.
Stop
And
making
so,
it weird, man. I was just saying I liked it.
yeah, it's like I said, I liked it. It's like, but yeah, it's like
But you've got those doubts. Yeah.
it's your own brain. It's like, acting against your best interests. It's
Yeah.
like just take the compliment, and it's like be happy. But yeah, it's like it's a bit of a trick in some ways. It's like I wouldn't necessarily jump on stage and be able to MC for 45 minutes, but
Right, right.
I can do a podcast.
Like when I was at a march or whatever or something, and I had to speak. It was terrifying in front of all those people. I was so fucking scared. I just hated it. I don't ever want to do it again, ever. And I'm not really the kind of, I feel like people think I'm the kind of person who could do that and have no problem with it just because I come across that way. But I hate it. I don't want any kind of part of that. And that made me realize that in a zombie apocalypse, I'm not going to be one of the leaders.
Hmm.
See, I'm going to be
Yeah.
like you in the back, standing in the back, going, I wonder what they're going to do.
Sometimes that's a safer approach.
Uh-huh.
Usually, the evil monster goes for the leader. So you
Yeah.
wait
Exactly.
until the
I'm no
leaders have all
leader. I'm
been
not a
eaten, and
leader.
then you can figure out what you're going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can be self-reliant to a detriment in some respects, because
Really.
I try to figure out it's like how many things that I can do is like on my own without having to ask for help. And or it's like if somebody needs help, I can provide help, but I get a little squirrely. It's like whenever I need to ask for help from somebody, because I again, it's like in the back of my brain I keep thinking somebody's going to say, "Oh, that's a dumb idea," and then it's like, and I don't want the criticism. I just want the assistance, or it's like,
Right.
or the
Right.
answer. I don't want
Right.
it's like the added zing. It's like it's like that comes with that.
Yeah.
So I got to the point, it's like where I don't necessarily know how to use Pro Tools or Adobe Audition all that well, but I know how to figure it out
Mm.
to
Yes.
major problems that I've come across, and then find YouTube videos. It's like for the rest. And even like I never took a journalism class really. I just learned how to turn on mics and press buttons and hit record. And so I, when somebody says, it's like, oh, it's like, it's like, you're a journalist. And I was like going, well, I interview people. And I kind of rephrase things that way because I don't have a degree in journalism. And folks, it's like that to me, it's like that are legit journalism guys. It's like they put in the time, they put in the, they did the terrible shifts. It's like with feel good stories and things. It's like that they slogged is like to get to the point. It's like where they're legit journalists, and I don't want to necessarily take that.
Not all of them have degrees, but they've all done the work.
Yeah. They had to put in the time. They had to write the multiple it's like stories. It's like about things just like that are nice but not necessarily impactful. It's like to kind of get to the point where they could do things that have meaning,
get their big break.
That really helped me because being starting out at the bottom is the way to do it, because I've had friends who walked into a star job. They were stars to begin with and they had a really tough time. But I started out just a beat reporter on the street trying to find somebody to interview. And, in San Francisco, that was easy. There was a lot of stuff to find, but it was just a matter of you do that enough, you can finally kind of work your way up through the ladder of journalism. But I didn't take any courses. I mean, I had friends that asked me, "Well, did you go to the Columbia School of Broadcasting to get into radio?" I said, "No, I just got into radio. I didn't study anything."
Well, it's like Thorne, right?
Thorne
is
it's
like Ray Hill. Mm-hmm. I mean, he just started doing the prison thing.
For yourself, Scoop, did you have your license? Did you have your broadcaster's license?
Yeah, I got the third phone back when I first started at the local radio station in Big Spring, Texas, in West Texas, and kept it for a long time. I'd wanted to get the first phone, which means you're kind of the engineer, which had better money and more job security. They didn't want to fire the engineer. Yeah. But no, I was too lazy to do that.
Yeah, that kind of wrapped up before I started doing stuff. But I heard many stories of folks. It's like, wow, you had to have like that the voice talent carried the FCC license to be a licensed broadcaster. And so it's like, in addition to having the station's FCC license, so you had to have like an actual ID to be able to be on the radio. So.
Yeah, well, wow. That was kind of required, but really what it was, the license was for is to keep the FCC out of your hair, because if you were going to be operating the equipment, basically the transmitter, that's what they were concerned about. And when I was working at KPFT, I'd already let my third phone lapse because I'd gone off and done other things that didn't require a third phone. And I went on and did all sorts of stuff. As long as someone in the station had a license, that's really all you needed.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just kind of how things kind of evolve. It's like, and a lot of it is, it's like, I imagine, is just time and wanting to get more bodies. It's like into studios and stuff. It's like, as opposed to having to just like maybe pay for expertise.
So do you guys think that as we go forward with our live streaming and Wi-Fi and all this stuff, that radio will die?
They've been talking about it for a long time, and I really don't think so. It's like, in some ways, I think it's like the Clear Channel stuff is like actually perpetuates its recognition factor. So it's like, and they end up having an investment in maintaining the industry. And so it's like, it's kind of like the devil type setup. It's like where I think they want to make sure it's like they maintain their investment. So I think it's like with those types of money concerns behind the scenes, radio will be around in some way, in some form. But I definitely think it would be evolving. I'm starting, for several years now, it's like you start to hear podcasts being played on radio
Uh-oh.
Whoop, whoop. Got to
Yeah,
freeze up
stations.
there. There you
You
go.
hear of like downloads as opposed to live. Yeah, yeah. My connection says unstable, but
Unstable. I am
I always thought
unstable.
the machine was being insulting.
It is
I'm
kind
a
of
very
rude.
stable person.
Very
exactly.
rude.
But
You know,
but yeah, I've heard podcast shows being broadcast on terrestrial radio, and I heard that terrestrial shows get more response off of podcast downloads, and so uh,
And then once again, I think of the zombie apocalypse.
yeah,
The
yeah,
only thing that's going to work is going to be radio. You're not going to be able to use your Wi-Fi,
yeah,
right? But you should be able to use a transmitter.
yeah. Well, most radio also is have their signal streamed out on the internet because some people want to hear it, but they don't want to turn on the
Right,
radio. And I have
right.
some friends who are into uh, a really exciting thing for local radio, and it's low power FM. Uh, my
Low
friend
power.
up in Mendocino County in California, he does his own little radio show out off of a kind of homebrew low power FM, and then another guy that I worked with at KPFT, Louis Leonard, has a low power FM up in Alaska, and there's a lot of that.
What is it?
It's just what it says, low power. Most FM radio stations are going to have a big blasting signal. I know, the
Right.
one I worked for in northern Texas was, I think we were like 25 or 30,000 watts. And these are like 500 watts maybe. I think that's.
So does that just mean that it doesn't go very far?
It is truly local. It just
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's so
it's for
cool.
it's for a local area,
I
and
love that.
the problem is though, FCC being what it is, makes it really hard you know, to get the license. You have to go through all sorts of hoops. So there are people you know rallying to the cause of trying to get it more
Yeah.
available because there's so many places that don't have radio at all. If you're way out, if you had somebody who could get a little low power station, you at least have some sort of entertainment going on in your small
Or
town.
some kind
Well,
of, you know,
I have to
town
look,
square.
but I think the Wimberley station that I was talking about earlier qualifies as a low power station.
Really.
There's one in Tyler called KBSR, which is out of a bar, and they do live broadcasts of the bands that play at the bar. And I there's initiatives to it's like to help those get off the ground, but there's also gear. It's like if you want to put together, it's like a transmitter, and even if you can get like a tower, which I think it's like 10 grand or something like that. It's like at least it's like to get a tower started for a transmitter. It There's a lot of upfront costs. It's like in gear, it's
Right.
like to be able to broadcast
Yeah, it's not
still,
cheap.
and so
Yeah.
there's
a-
issues.
And then do they have to keep it running 24 hours a day?
Not
I mean,
necessarily.
Yeah, I don't
It,
think
it
so.
depends on the license. Some
Yeah.
places you could. I worked at a couple of stations that were only daytime, but you had to sign off when the sun went
okay.
down.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's because I always thought there was like a rule about no, if you had too long of a space of quiet on radio,
Well, that's
that
just dead air. That's one of the cardinal sins. No dead air. You can't just stop talking, and that was dead air
oh
right there.
yeah,
You can't do
we're all
that.
like what
Can't do that.
what
Yeah, I have to think about some of the deals. It's like I do notice like there's something that's like about if you don't use the signal, it's like then you run the risk of having the license lapse.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
If you're not on the air, then yeah,
you can't just hold it. It's like and just sit on it. You have to actually use the license, if I remember right. But it's like one of the things that's like that you reminded me of is like talking about folks who get into podcasting. There's a guy that I found late, Studs Terkel out of
I love
Chicago.
Oh
Studs.
yes,
He's the
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, and I love him. And he is the guy who did podcasting before podcasting was invented.
That's right.
And he would talk with the everyman, and he would talk just like to folks like that who were hawking newspapers, just like at the newsstand and things like that, and just find out it's like what they're into. It's like and how they got here, and it's like and what about their family, and so that type of line of talking to the average person has kind of changed. It's like a little bit of how I approach interviews, and I end up
That's cool.
humanizing a lot of folks I end up getting a chance to talk to, and I like the things like that the folks that I talk to appreciate it, and so.
Well, there's also pirate radio. And
Yeah, what's that about?
there used to be some stations here in Austin. I know my friend Bob Simmons, I believe, ran one for a while, and he finally ended up selling his little 1,000-watt transmitter.
Was he KOS? KOAS?
I can't remember.
Do you just
what
make
it
up your own
was.
letters? What is the?
Oh, you didn't really need any letters. You
For
just
pirate?
for pirate, and I actually did a little of that in the Bay Area. My friend Dave McQueen that worked at he was the news guy at KSAN Radio, and he's also an alumnus of KPFT in Houston, and he had been given one by his wife at the time. He told her how he really liked this 100-watt shortwave radio that was in one of the stores there in Berkeley. So she went and got it to him, gave it to him for his birthday, and he had. There's no way he was going to do it. He'd lose his job from going up and firing up an illegal broadcast. I didn't have any scruples, so me and a buddy would go up, and there was always a thing on. It was on Halloween. All the pirate radio people would go in and at least do a broadcast on Halloween where you'd go off somewhere and fire it up, and then I fired up my buddy helped me do this. I fired out the 100-watt shortwave transmitter, and I probably triggered every garage door opener in the East Bay. It was very funny. Then we just did some pre-recorded stuff and then ran for it because we figured that the FCC was going to be after us, and I doubt if they really give a shit.
My uncle, when I was a kid, he got me and my cousin shortwave radios, but we could only do Morse code.
Oh,
interesting. Did you learn?
Yeah.
Wow.
I learned.
Boy,
that's impressive.
Yeah, you got me on that because I was a big shortwave radio fan. I would listen, but
I would want to listen.
I just couldn't. I couldn't do the shortwave. I mean, the Morse code. It was.
Yeah, that's like your intro license level, and I ended up getting a license, and so there is I have a handle for a shortwave radio license somewhere in my stuff. I did it, but I did that. It's like years ago when I was in Boy Scouts. It's like to get a merit badge, and I haven't kept up with it. And but that's another thing that kind of appears during disasters is guys with shortwave radio rigs.
Exactly.
Yeah, they have big get-togethers where they go out. Everybody brings their gear along, and they do broadcasts just to kind of organize and find out who's going to be available if there is an emergency.
I'm telling you, zombie apocalypse.
That's one of the ways that people get information because these guys are everywhere.
Yeah, and depending on how the weather works, it's like there's they try to get like postcards. It's like from stations that they hit different parts of the world and things like that, and they try to it's like, well, let's see it's like where we're connecting at, and so it's timing and environment, and it's like but it's a big thing. It's like to kind of keep up with, and it's an interesting hobby. It didn't take for me, unfortunately, but it's like I am in awe. It's like some of the folks like they can do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. I still have shortwave radios that I listen to because it's interesting what's happened to shortwave. You used to hear all sorts of things on there, but right now all you can find are ultra-conservative religious broadcasters. One of them out of Quito, Ecuador, and there's some in the United States, and they have huge transmitters. I'm sure they're not legal, but they,
Wow.
nobody's going to come and bust the Reverend Fred who has a 200,000 watt transmitter.
They're making use of that kind of quasi legal shortwave radio band and just
Yep, yep.
making the most out of it. It's like for their interests.
Maybe
So
there's like a sort of like they're tax exempt. Maybe there's a special exemption for them because they're a church.
Yeah,
maybe so, at least for the property and
Yeah.
property tax. And but I want to see CB radios come back. I want to. It's like I'm
Oh
waiting for that.
yeah.
man.
The Breaker
I'm
19s.
Breaker
Yeah,
19 for 1036.
yeah,
Yeah, we used to do that. My grandfather had those. We would talk on those things. Oh, that was so fun. And why
yeah.
not? I mean, and so okay, with shortwave radio, can you just it's on one channel and you have to know that channel, is that right? I
For
mean, is
for
that how that
CB.
yeah, no, I know for CB, but for
Oh,
like the stuff we were talking about earlier, when you only have, a small group of people that you can transmit to.
uh, the way shortwave works is that there's all these different bands, the meter bands, and some of them will go for a long distance. Shortwave broadcasts skip based on the atmospheric conditions. It skips off with what it's is it the stratosphere, one of the
Yeah,
layers, and it will bounce halfway around the world. And there's others that are very much, almost line of sight because they really don't have that effect. But there's all
Wow.
sorts of frequencies, and
yeah. You get a
there's
lot of variety from what I remember.
mhm.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man, I we should get CBs and start. We're gonna bring it back. Come on, Tracy.
Well,
I'm
talk
gonna
about
get one.
CB. I've been, I have some CB rate. I have a lot
Do
of gear.
you?
Yeah, I'm incurable. I used to ask my wife, and I was listening to it the other day, and I'm in Bastrop County, which is not a liberal enclave, and I was hearing a lot of the paramilitary folks in Bastrop County talking back and forth. A lot of anti-Biden smack talk,
Are you
Mm.
serious?
and yeah, because basically no one knew uh, CB even exists. That's old technology that
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
even the truckers don't use it anymore.
And
yeah. So you
so
can
these
just have.
militias are using it?
Yep, because it's pretty much unregulated. So I've been listening and trying to zero in on some of these folks, but
God, I'm
It
so
it kind of
getting a
makes
it's
sense.
CB.
frightening.
It kind of makes sense. It's like, it's like you don't have to worry about somebody's like watching after your Facebook group or something like that.
Yeah,
You can be, it's
yeah.
like more
Unless
and
someone's recording it.
Yeah, and talk about radio. This is how my wife is. She's recovering from an operation, so she's
mm,
not mobile. So whenever I'm in the studio, I have this business band radio, and
yeah,
Yeah.
little
she
walkie
can call
talkies.
me, little walk it, and those are some of them will get maybe 5 miles, but this was
How much is a CB radio? I want to get one and start listening for the militias.
Well, like
uh,
Radio Shack would be like $10 if
oh,
if Radio Shack was still around. So
they're giving them away. We actually have a Radio Shack here.
yeah,
Uh, they're like $50.
Yeah, I mean,
you can find them. It's like on eBay and stuff, and some of them have like the
I'm
fake
getting
wood
one.
grain and
I love the fake. You have to get the faux grain finish. It's like
yeah,
Ricardo Montalban and his rich Corinthian leather.
yeah. You have
I'm
to get it
getting
like classic
one.
'80s version. Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
so getting one. And Scoop, we're gonna talk, and then Tracy, you have to get one because it's gonna be so fun. We're gonna listen. We're gonna know what the
well,
militias
the
are up
problem with CB is it doesn't go that far,
No,
unless you
I
have
know,
Yeah,
but
unless you have one of those illegal ones where they have a huge antenna and they
well,
boost
you
the
guys should
power.
be able to hear stuff though.
Yeah,
And when
yeah.
well,
you go in the car, right?
yeah,
It's definitely something. It's like, I travel, it's like about an hour each direction for work and stuff, and so it'd be nice. It's like to just have something to kind of kill time besides audiobooks
Yeah.
and Spotify. So it's like it could
Yeah.
be fun.
Let's
So.
listen to some white nationalists. I think that sounds fun.
Yeah, well, I'm out here in Jade Helm country,
I
so
know you are. I know you are,
that,
man.
that's why
Yeah,
that's why I stay in the studio most of the time. I don't
New
go out.
Braunfels has gotten pretty conservative over the years. It's like
That's what I was.
our state rep is Dr. Campbell, and
Oh, right.
she's a I don't
Piece
know.
of
It's like
work.
a yeah, she's definitely a piece of work, and it's like and into theocracy,
Oh yeah.
and it's like and leading by the Bible, and it's like all right, okay, and she's one of those folks. It's like that will have that position as long as she wants it. And so, yeah, it's like it's interesting. We had Trump truck rallies every Thursday night at sundown in the Braunfels. It's like where everybody get in their big truck and have their Trump flags and go all throughout town and circle around and go
Shoot their
by
guns
Great
and
Hall.
drink beer.
Well, the
And all
place
right,
where I
cool.
live has
Jesus.
golf cart rallies, and during the election, they were all the Trump train of golf carts. I
Well,
rolled.
they
I was so tempted to take my big truck out there and like
didn't they do
do
something
the
to
reversal on
spite?
the. They did it to the Biden bus. I was tempted to go
Oh,
out
that was
Uh,
fucked up. That was
and
well,
so
mess with the
not
Trump
right.
train, but I figured they probably were armed and I would have died. So
it's like
Yes.
I ended up like talking to one or two. It's like because they didn't know who I was. It's like or what I was about, and so it's like but so it's like yeah, it was definitely deep conspiracy stuff. Um, but if you're into Schadenfreude, every once in a while
Yes.
something will happen, like the Trump boat thing that happened on Canyon Lake
It was
oh
south
yeah,
of the
brilliant.
Braunfels, where they had too many boats. It's like at one time, and they swamped each other in the wakes of their own
Idiots.
boats.
Idiots, idiots, idiots. I love it. Let's just like natural selection. Let's
And
just get them out
I
of
think
here.
there was like two, maybe three boats that sank
yeah.
Yep.
because it's like they got
Completely
swamped.
sank.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I feel
There
for
were
them.
there were pictures of it underwater with the
Yeah,
Trump
it's
flag.
like it's kind of scary because it's like I wouldn't want anybody is like to pass away, say from something like that. But it's like at the same time, I also like it's if you're around a boat, it's like you should know about some of this stuff. It's
Yeah.
like before you get in a boat, it's like
and
and go yeehaw.
It looked
and
like a
it's
lot of those
not
people really didn't know what they were doing. They probably
oh.
got Uncle Louie's boat and borrowed it for the.
They just wanted to go out there and be assholes and yell and be
Yeah,
and act like it's spring break and these are adults. It's like, what is happening? I really
It was
don't
this
spring
is
break
understand
for
it.
senior citizens mostly.
this is a total aside story, but it's also related at the same time. It's like one of the many random side jobs I have. It's like as I work at ACL Live Moody Theaters. Like it's
Mhm.
one of the theaters here in town. We have bands, and there's certain bands that come through town. Like if it's like Earth, Wind, and Fire, or it's like something like that, or the Beach Boys. Inevitably, somebody decides to, it's like we're going to do it like we did 25 years ago
Oh
and
God.
tailgate in the parking lot and drink a case of beer before going into the venue. But it's like you're 50 now. And
Mhm.
so they don't last past three songs, and they have to be escorted out because it's like they pass out. And that was like a running trend. I was trying to figure out, I was like, what's going on? It's like, and it was like certain era of bands. It's like from the 80s and 90s. It's like and it's like Megadeth or something like that. Actually, oddly enough, I should say it's like the metal bands like Slayer and the hard rock bands like Megadeth. Their fans are awesome. There's like super cool, super chill. They're just happy to be there, and they know they already know. I guess it's like there's a preconception. It's like about metalheads, and so it's like
Yeah.
they're over extra nice. And it's like just certain types and certain country acts. It's like they decide it's like, all right, we're gonna drink our weight in alcohol, and they can't do it anymore. And so it's like it
No,
catches
isn't
up to
that a
them back.
surprise? Isn't that
Yeah,
a surprise when that day that you wake up and go, oh my God, I almost killed myself. I'm gonna have to completely stop this now.
yeah.
Well,
Hey,
I'm glad to hear that you're doing that gig because when radio news went away, I went to the music business. I managed bands in the Bay Area for about 10 years, and then went into concert production with California promoters. And I experienced just what you're talking about, having to scrape people off the floor or try to get people from jumping on stage with their idol. And
I
oh,
bet.
we'll
God.
have you back to talk about some of those stories.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that. And
Luckily,
some
it's like nothing's gotten too crazy, but every once in a while
I'll
you
give
see
it time.
something that's totally avoidable. But but it's kind of wild, and it's like and I was never the guy who brought it's like a 12 pack for me and a 6 pack for the party. I just never was that big of a beer drinker, even with like Near Beer and Lone Star and Milwaukee Beast and the things that we had. It's like to lean on Boone's
Mhm.
it's like
oh no,
farm
no,
things
no,
like that.
no.
Like that was like the classic mid 90s stuff. And it's like
Yeah,
I just
Everclear. Oh
yeah,
God.
I never got hooked on that where I had to be it's like blackouts like to have a fun time. It's like so
Right.
I kind of consider myself luckier now. It's like that I never picked up as like any bad habits like that. It's like but yeah, I knew more than a few folks. It's like they had to really party hard to party at all, and
Mhm.
Oh
I
man.
hope they're doing okay. It's like I hope they're doing all right.
Yeah,
Hope they
concerts
figured it out.
concerts in the 80s and 90s were unique. I used to see people coming in, and they were trying to bring in a big jug that they said was just orange juice. Yeah,
To help me
I knew
to
that
help me
trick
with my
because
acid trip.
I'd done it before at the Day on the Green concerts that Bill Graham did. They didn't have any liquor being sold backstage, and we all sat backstage, and I would bring in orange juice that we'd had a little Everclear added to.
Yeah.
But these people
Exactly.
would be, I mean, and it never failed. They'd be either trying to climb up on stage or trying to, you know, get into a fist fight with whoever was close to them. And it's like, okay, we've got to get rid of these guys. But there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
Before we go, I want to just mention the throwback to what ACL used to be.
Mm.
ACL used to be at the student lounge in at UT, and you would go and you would line up, and whoever was it was first come first serve, and so
Yeah.
everybody would line up, and it was free. It was
Yeah.
completely free. What are the tickets going for now? The low end is maybe 65,
Well,
maybe.
I think for the actual Austin City Limits television show tapings, they do a lottery, and it's like, and there's an email list, and you have to put your name. It's like on the email list, but then it's like those lists can get kind of thick, and if it's
Yeah.
like a boutique artist like the Foo Fighters,
Right.
guaranteed that most of those tickets are going to go to sponsors and supporters,
Absolutely.
fundraisers, it's like
Oh, absolutely.
for this show. But it's still honestly still
But then,
relatively a big deal. It's like if you get a chance to see those shows.
but then, but then I'm not done yet. And it was done in a very small space where
Yes,
you were
on
just,
campus.
I
Yeah.
mean, you could have touched the Indigo Girls, or Lyle Lovett. Ann Richards was sitting, 10 feet away from you, and they gave you 2 free Lone Stars.
They did do free beers like for those early
I mean,
broadcasts.
and now it's like all high end, and it costs it. I mean, you try to get a beer, get a Lone Star there now, and you just might as well forget about going to dinner after.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like
once Live Nation took over, basically concert production through the nation, you know, the prices, just kept going up and up to where you basically have to take out a mortgage to get some of these big tours. You get any kind of tickets.
yeah, festivals and venues like arenas and stuff like that. It's like cost prohibitive, but
Yes.
somebody somewhere is like did the market analysis on it, and it's like one of those things where there's something about, well, like it's like at a club you pay a guarantee to a band, or the tickets go to the band and the beer sales goes to the venue. Or at least that is like the way the old school setup was.
Right.
And so it's like if the market will allow $20
Yes,
Lone Stars.
But that's just the point, though, is now, I mean, when it was Austin City Limits at UT, anybody could go. Leslie could go.
Yeah.
You know, and
you just line up and wait. And
yeah,
I will say,
like, only if you can afford it do you get to partake in this thing that made Austin what it is. So all of us poor Austinites can't afford to go anymore. You know,
I will say it's like for ACL Live Moody Theater, most of their shows are not ACL tapings, but they use the venue as a regular production theater venue where you buy tickets. It's like for ACL TV tapings that I've gotten to be able to be a part of, I just wait at the standby line. There's the Willie Nelson statue right there on 2nd and Lavaca. And if you show up, like, say 6 o'clock for an 8 o'clock show, there's probably about another 30 people there at that time. And the way I heard it, it's like from somebody associated with the TV shows, that they usually take the first 75 that wait outside. They
really,
they don't give away all the tickets because they want to maintain that walk up vibe. And there's a couple of folks that I've run across that camp out.
I'm sorry, did you say buy? You still have to buy the ticket?
Well, they want to maintain that walk up vibe, and so it's like,
okay.
they don't give away all the tickets for the venue, because I think the venue is like, even with the cameras and lights and everything, is still, I think, 2,700. It's like if it's full out to the max, it's like with all 3 floors. And so I think they still want to kind of keep that walk up setup, it's like that you talked about, where folks could still feel like they can get in to see a show, but at the same time you have to plan and you have to camp. And
that's fine. I mean, that to me is fine. That's what we used to do. If it's free and anybody can get in, if you just line up and wait, that's one thing, you know. But
yeah, like, for the TV tapings, they're still free. It's like, but there's always secondary markets, and they try to cramp down on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
The whole thing of allowing those walk-ups is important for TV, especially because they don't want an empty building. They don't want empty seats.
Right.
You know, you see that at the award shows. They have the people that are seat fillers, and they want some people to be seat fillers because, you know, it's a big no-no to have the camera pan through the crowd and there's empty seats. It's like, well, it makes you look.
It looks like a Trump
you're
rally.
Unpopular. So you don't want to let that happen.
Yeah, and ACL is still kind of interesting, where it's like, if I remember the lore right, from the beginning, they would just pay an artist a flat $500 guarantee. And it's like that would be, it's like to book the band. So it's like, even now to this day,
honor for them to play.
Right. And they have full control of their show. They can play any song they want, any order that they want. They can introduce anything that they want. It's like the stage is theirs for as long as they want. If they want to do a full hour, or like one time I got to see Jason Isbell and 400 Unit, and they played for 3 hours. And then they released it as it's like a 2 CD set. So you can actually go find the Jason Isbell live from Austin City Limits, because it's like those are recordings that he has. And
wow, I love him.
They turn all that stuff back over to the artist and to the artist label, which also makes it kind of hard to find their stuff. It's like if an artist releases their live ACL taping, then you get to see it and hear it. It's like on this in a video, or it's like, or a DVD, it's like, or as an album. But ACL, they don't have a dedicated YouTube channel because they don't have all the rights to all the things. It was part of that initial agreement with those talent. It's like to be a one-time only $500 one-time only broadcast type deal. They have greatest hits episodes, and they may re-air an episode, but I saw the
that's Cindy all locked Lauper down. Episode. They re-aired that one.
Yeah, back in the early days, you know, they were, you know, the artists were generally fine with just getting, you know, a little bit of money for that. They were making their money off of records, and today it's not that case. artists don't make money off of selling their music. They make money off of touring and merchandise, because that's the only place that they have any control over it. Because it's just hard to make any money out. Streaming doesn't pay anything. Spotify doesn't pay.
Yeah, it's a different dynamic, and we'll still have music, we'll still have artists, but
well,
the
now
pandemic caused some issues.
What's it called? CHP chat or what is C? I mean, they're
AI chatbots.
Yeah, they're just making song after song after song, and spitting them out in an algorithm, and Taylor Swift will see it, or whatever cream cheese Disney, star they crank out for the next.
They use auto-tune to make them sound like they can sing.
Exactly.
Well, I hate to be Mr. Buzzkill, but I think I have no idea where we are because of where we started a little late. But Tracey, we must have you back. This was fun, and
I'm down to chat anytime. I appreciate it, and I appreciate y'all. I'm flattered that y'all guys think of me. It's like for these things.
Absolutely.
You're awesome. We're flattered that you're flattered. So.
Well, if there's one last thing that I forgot to get to, it's like when we were talking about accents and dialects and stuff. It's like about broadcasting. If you ever get a chance to see Fred Armisen do stand-up, Fred Armisen, folks know his face from Saturday Night Live. He does this whole bit. It's like toward the end of his stand-up routine where he asks people to stump him. It's like pick a town anywhere in the United States, and he'll figure out how to do an accent from that town. And he's been at all the places, and that's something that he really makes. It's like
he's good at it. He's a good mimicker. He really is. I've seen him do it. It's amazing.
He could do it's like East Texas versus West Texas versus South Texas. It's like nobody else. He and it sounds authentic.
Well, thanks everybody. Well, I'm gonna hit the big red button, and we can all go have whatever it is that's waiting for you. Mine is a big glass of wine. So good night. Thanks, Tracey. Thanks, Suzy.
Thanks, Tracey. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Scoop.
Thank you guys. Much obliged.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.